Okay. Can you hear me on Zoom?
People on Zoom can do a thumbs up if you can hear Ajahn.
Zoomers, are you there? Are you?
Okay,
Yeah.
some
Okay.
thumbs up.
Okay. Good. Okay. Excellent.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone, and I'm assuming that people on Zoom can pick up my voice too. My name's Mark Nunberg, one of the guiding teachers, and we're really grateful that Ajahn Brahmali has taken some time in his tour of the United States. He's just reviewed with me all the places he's visiting. He just finished a retreat here in town. Maybe some of you were able to go to that retreat. And it's unusual and really great fortune to have a wise senior monastic and a Western monastic, so we can, they understand sort of our culture more to share the Buddhist teachings. So really grateful for you to be here. And Nandana was gonna give a little bit more background. Yeah, please. Maybe stand a little closer so that this mic will pick up for that. Yeah, I think so.
Thank you, Mark. I was hoping Mark would do the honors for me. He would have done it more eloquently than I could, I'm sure. I'm supposed to introduce Ajahn Brahmali tonight. Ajahn Brahmali, thank you very much again for visiting us in Minnesota. Fortunately, we have some monastics who are from Norway who would dare to visit Minnesota in the winter. I don't know whether I'm qualified to actually do this job, to introduce a wise senior monk like Ajahn Brahmali. And anyway, even if I tell you things about Ajahn Brahmali, you're going to Google it, right? And find out a lot about him. And so I'm trying to think what I can say that you cannot find on Google.
This sounds worrying. This is scary. Okay, see what happens now.
Yeah, by the way, if you look at Google or find him on YouTube, this is a challenge that I always faced when I was trying to find his talks on YouTube. You start typing Ajahn Brahmali, you get so many links, but all of them are Ajahn Brahm. Yes. So I'm kind of, okay, out of 10 links, 8 of them are Ajahn Brahm's talks. So I'm looking for Ajahn Brahmali and going down, in the last 1 or 2. So I was kind of thinking, okay, how do I find Ajahn Brahmali's talks? And I don't know what it is now, because I always have his talks in my favorite, so I have no trouble finding them. So to tell about Ajahn Brahmali, Buddha, I think, once said, don't ask me where and when. I think you can ask Ajahn Brahmali where Buddha said this. Buddha said that if you know the Dhamma, you know me. So if you want to know Ajahn Brahmali, listen to his talks. It's very normal. He has so many, very profound and also very simple and analytical talks on sutras and the Dhamma, explaining the Dhamma. So I really don't know much about Ajahn Brahmali's, the history or anything.
Good.
But I just know that he was in 1996 at Bodhinyana Monastery as Ajahn Brahm as his preceptor. So since then he has been teaching meditation at the Jhana Grove, and he's a resident monk at Bodhinyana Monastery. And I had the rare opportunity to do a retreat at Bodhinyana Monastery about 7 years ago. I believe it was in 2016 with Ajahn Brahm. So after the retreat, I spent a couple of days in one of the kutis at the Bodhinyana Monastery, and I had again another rare opportunity to sit down with Ajahn Brahmali and have some coffee. And I invited him to come to the United States to pay a visit. That was 7 years ago, and he said, Nandana, I don't think that's going to happen because my schedule is pretty busy. I'm traveling, and I'm teaching here, and I have a rains retreat here. He very kindly declined it, and 2 years later, I extended my invitation again, And he said, again, I'm sorry, Nandana, I won't be able to make it. And 7 years later, he accepted my invitation. So he is something that you will not never find out from Google or YouTube. He's a Buddhist monk who keeps his promises. So we are again grateful to you, Ajahn Brahmali, for visiting us, and I will not take any more of your time.
Thank
Over to
you,
you.
Nandana. Great, excellent. That's wonderful. I now have to live up to this terrible expectation, but anyway, we'll see what happens. Nandana, could I please? Is there another cushion I could take? Yeah, I kind of like. Well, maybe Mark. Yeah, okay, great. I just trying to really. That's well. Now it's going to be much happier meditation as a consequence. So let's do some meditation together first of all. Is that a good idea? Yeah. Okay. So let's start with some meditation. Can you understand my accent? Maybe used to this here anyway. So I don't know. I hear people have a slightly Scandinavian accent sometimes. That's good. All right. Wow, that's a serious one. Let's see what happens with this. Oh, this is pretty high. Okay. So just let's do some meditation together. So just relax. Find a nice and comfortable posture for yourself. Remember that meditation is about the don't move. Meditation is about the mind, not about the body. So you want to get the body out of the way, basically. And that is what the middle path is all about. So get the body out of the way. And close your eyes. And the nice thing about closing your eyes is that you shut out so much of the sense impressions that distort the mind. And you can really feel your body when you shut your eyes. So feel your body for a while. Make sure that you relax properly, you let go of any tensions, any kind of problem in the body. Try to just let that be and just allow it to dissipate by being peaceful and just enjoying sitting right here. There is obviously a close connection between body and mind. So a kind of a fast way of relaxing the mind is to do that through the body. So just by focusing on the body, being kind to yourself, having a sense of compassion, having a sense of just gratitude for being here, allowing things just to calm down and relaxing the body. And one of the tricks of meditation is not to go to the object too soon, but to allow things to settle down. Take a lot of time to allow the mindfulness to arise and the body and the mind to settle down before you do any kind of real meditation, if you like. And one of the most important aspects of meditation is to enjoy what you're doing. So see the delight in what is happening. See that peace that is enveloping you in a beautiful center like this. And also just feel that release from all the burdens of life. You just close your eyes and you leave everything behind. And even if you just enjoy the relaxation of meditation, that is enough in its own right. But if you're able to give rise to a stable mindfulness, even better. The mindfulness arises, then very gently you can go to the breath, or even better, allow the breath to come to you, as if you're not doing anything at all, except for waiting, relaxing, and being aware. And if you decide to do the breath meditation, remember that the attitude you have is the most important thing here. So see your breath as your friend. Have a sense of kindness and compassion to your breath. Have a sense of gratitude that the breath has supported you for all of these years. And have a friend. And when you have a friend, don't control the friend. Allow the friend to come and go as it pleases. If you lose the breath, it's okay. When the breath comes back again, welcome the breath back. Okay, so coming towards the end of the meditation, not quite there yet. Spend just a few moments at the end just to evaluate what you have been doing here. And if you do feel a bit more peaceful or mindful or gentle or whatever it might be, ask yourself why that is the case. Okay. So welcome again. And the strange title for tonight's talk is, what is it again? I've forgotten what it is now. It's something about constitutional freedoms and Buddhist morality and how they meet or something like that. Yeah.
Is there a connection?
Is there a connection? Right. Okay, that's kind of good enough. So this sounds like a lawyer has made that up, right? Constitutional freedoms. I didn't even know what that was when I saw those words. I had a rough idea, but not really fully. And of course, it has been made up by a lawyer. It was made up by Nandana, who spoke here before. You're a lawyer, right, Nandana? So there you are. So it was made up the lawyer's kind of idea of a title for a Dhamma talk. So that's how that title came about. And it's one of the nice things about being a Buddhist monk. Often you just get other people to choose your titles, which actually is great. Yeah, and it kind of comes up with, otherwise you say the same thing every time we give a talk. If someone else comes up with a title, actually gives you an excuse for, or it gives you an idea, you have to think a bit differently here, which is great. So what is the idea behind this talk? And my idea behind this kind of talk, when I hear about it, is the idea of freedom. Constitutional freedoms. And one thing is the idea of freedom in our ordinary world, what ordinary people consider freedom. And then you have the freedom on the Buddhist path, which actually is quite different. So I thought it's a good opportunity to discuss the idea of freedom and what it actually means in Buddhism. And I think this is it's a very important topic, actually. And it's the sort of thing that can inspire you on the path, can drive you forward. One of the most important things in Buddhism is this idea of kind of feeling the teachings. They're getting an emotional connection to these teachings, the teachings to be visceral, because when they are, that is actually what motivates you and drives you in the practice. Too often we are kind of too intellectual, too much in our heads, not enough kind of, we don't feel these things enough. And when we start to feel the teachings of the Buddha, that's when they become really powerful. So what does freedom mean? And if you can get a feeling for that freedom, get inspired by it, inspiration is kind of very often the critical thing in Buddhism. As in anything we do in life, if you want to be good at something, you have to be inspired by it. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And of course, when we talk about kind of constitutional freedoms, kind of you go back to the American Constitution, right? I had to look it up because I can't remember these things. The American Constitution is not, you're not that familiar with it when you're kind of born and grown up in Norway. So you have to excuse me for that. But it's something about the unalienable, no, how do you say that word? Inalienable, that's what it is. Inalienable right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? And right there, you have the idea of liberty, and you have the idea of pursuit of happiness. And of course, those two things are very closely connected with each other, right? The idea of liberty allows you to pursue happiness in this world. And of course, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, it sounds pretty good, right? It sounds kind of reasonable. And of course, when you hear those words, I think most people get inspired by those kind of things. We want to be free. We want to pursue happiness in the world in our own way. Everyone wants to be happy in this world. Everyone wants to reduce suffering. If you don't want to reduce suffering, no need to be here, right? You might, because this is going to be about how to reduce suffering and find more happiness in life, which is what Buddhism is all about and which our lives are all about. So the idea in the kind of American Constitution, the preamble or whatever it is, They are kind of, make sense, and they are inspiring in a certain way here. But there is a problem here. And the problem is that when you say the pursuit of happiness, it assumes that you know what happiness is and where you are going to find it, right? That's kind of the underlying assumption there. And that if you, because you know it, and then you have the liberty to pursue it, then you will pursue that happiness. But what if we don't understand happiness? What if we don't know where to find it? And this is, of course, essentially what the Buddha is saying. That's why we have the Four Noble Truths, right? About dukkha, suffering, the rising of dukkha, the ending of dukkha. The reason we have these teachings is precisely because normally what we pursue is not happiness, but suffering. So what do you want to pursue, suffering or happiness? And this is kind of the critical thing. Yeah, most people pursue suffering, and that is a big issue. And that is why the American Constitution is a noble document. I don't know anything about it, but it sounds like noble anyway, this preamble part. But there is this hitch that we don't really know what we're doing here. And of course, this is where the Buddha comes in. So if you kind of join the Buddhist teaching with the American Constitution, maybe that's when you get the kind of the ultimate constitution here. Is that possible to kind of change the constitution, add a few Buddhist teachings in there? I think that's going to work. Yeah. I wonder whether we can do that. That would be really interesting here. And so this is what I'm going to talk about, how we should understand happiness in the right way so that we can actually pursue real freedom, not some kind of fake, secondhand, dodgy freedom, the real deal, as they say here. So maybe first of all, some of these kind of constitutional rights, the constitutional freedoms that we have, such as the constitutional right to freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of assembly, or whatever they are, all of these things, they're obviously important. If there wasn't freedom of religion here in the United States, you probably couldn't be here. There would be a kind of Christian dictatorship. Everyone either Christian or you either leave the country or I don't know what happens to you otherwise. Something bad happens to you. And it is interesting if you travel around the world, and I travel quite a lot. You go to countries where religion is very clearly limited. Certain people are not allowed to hear certain teachings. And this is true in certain places in Asia, like Malaysia, for example, where I go. Malaysia has a large Buddhist population, but the majority population is Muslim. It's an Islamic country, basically, run by the leaders are basically Muslims. And so when you get the Buddhist book in Malaysia, there's a little saying on if you look at the back cover, it says for non-Muslims only here. Quite literally here, right? For non-Muslims only. And that's what happens when you don't have proper freedom of religion here. And this is, not that uncommon around the world. So I think these constitutional freedoms that we have, they serve a certain purpose. And we should, I think, from a Buddhist point of view, we should look after them, and we should make sure that we don't lose these kind of freedoms. They are important. It's important to be able to say what you want. It's important, if you do it in a decent way, right? We're Buddhists after all. It is important to be able to say what we want and to be able to discuss religion openly, and even to criticize other religions, right? I tend to be very critical of other religions. I hear that in Minnesota, you're not supposed to be so critical. That's true. I heard about Minnesota nice today. I never heard about Minnesota nice until today. So you have to be careful what you say here. So I picked that up in Minnesota nice. Okay. That means like you are nice, but kind of a bit superficial or something. Is that what it means? Or what does it mean? I'm not entirely sure what it means. Something like that. But anyway, it's good that you are nice people. I really appreciate that. So we should really look after the idea of freedom of religion. And what is fascinating here, if you go back to the time of the Buddha, and if you look at the north of India at that time, the area where the Buddha was active in the kind of Ganges plain, around the Ganges River. Have any of you been to India? No? No one's been to India? Okay. Well, you're missing out, Have you been to India? Really cool. Okay. Have you been to the Buddhist sites in India as well? Yeah, okay, marvelous. I'll talk to you afterwards. We can discuss the kind of best holy sites in India, that kind of stuff. Great, I love India. I find India such a fascinating country. It's kind of a love-hate relationship, to be honest with you, because there are big downsides with India as well. But it's where the Buddha was born. It's where the Buddha, gave his teachings. This is where the Pali Canon and the early Buddhist teachings were kind of established in India. And you know why when you go there. It's a very religious country. Almost everyone is interested in spiritual teachings. You travel in the Western world, especially in Northern Europe, where I'm from, it's like a spiritual desert. Yeah, seriously, it is really bad. I don't know what it's like here in the US. Maybe it's a bit better, but Northern Europe is like a spiritual desert. I went to Poland last year. Poland was actually quite spiritual by comparison to Norway, anyway. So India is this is what the Buddha was, and it's really nice to go there, see the Buddha's holy sites, go to places where the Buddha was. You read the Pali Sutta, as in you see the description of these places, and then you go to the place, and lo and behold, you recognize the place. And when you do that, when you read the suttas and you recognize the place, you know that these are historical documents. You may read a sutta and it may feel a little bit like a fairy tale, like a story. It's hard to really know whether these are real teachings or not, right? But then when you go there and you actually see what is going on, one of my a couple of favorite incidents. I always get a bit distracted when I give this talk, but a couple of my favorite incidents in India. One is in Rajagaha. Rajagaha is the ancient capital of the Magadhan Empire, which later on became the Empire of Ashoka, which was the biggest empire in Indian history. And Rajagaha was the original capital of that empire. And Rajagaha is described in the suttas. And one of the things it says about Rajagaha is that at the base of one of the big hills in Rajagaha was also known as Giribhaja. Giribhaja means like a hill fort. It's a hill fort because there's hills surrounding the city, and then the city is in the middle. That's like you have a natural fort surrounded by hills. And at the bottom of one of these hills, according to the suttas, it says there was a hot spring, and the monks would go there to bathe. And then there was one occasion when the king couldn't get to bathe because the monks were bathing. So the king would wait on the side for the monks to finish. That's how monks were treated in those days. I don't know if you treat monks how we treat monks here, but that's how it was treated in ancient. The king would wait, right? Then the monks would get out, and then the king would wait afterwards. And then he went to complain to the Buddha because the monks took too long. That's kind of stories you see sometimes in the Vinaya Pitaka. This is the kind of the conduct of the monastics and the regulations of the monastic order is found in the Vinaya Pitaka. And so the hot springs are there, right? And then you go to India and you go to the foot of exactly the same hill. What do you find? You find Indians bathing in the hot springs, 2,500 years later, nothing has changed then. And that's kind of, to me, that was kind of an eye-opener when I saw that. I didn't really expect it to be that close to what is in the suttas. Another occasion, I went to Varanasi, Benares, which is kind of this very ancient city. You may have heard about Benares, a very famous city in India, considered holy by the Brahmins of India. And that was known as the city of cloth at the time of the Buddha. The best cloth in India would be had from Benares. When I went to Benares, this cloth merchant would come up to me. Sir, buy cloth, best cloth in India. They should have known I was a monk. I don't actually have any money, but they didn't get that. So they trying to sell me this cloth. And again, it was this deja vu feeling, I've seen this before. Where? In the suttas. And that's kind of powerful. It makes the suttas come alive. If you want to have kind of a relationship with the Buddha and the Dhamma in a more profound way, this is actually very powerful. You get the feeling that these are real historical texts with roots in a real culture somewhere. And that's kind of it's an eye-opener, when these things happen. And there's more to it than that, but those are kind of two of the basic things that I like to point out. But what I really wanted to say was that India at the time of the Buddha was was a culturally kind of a melting pot. It was lots of different teachers. It was culturally very diverse. You had very large diversity in religions, for example, a large number of different religions. You have all these people who would go for it, and they would go forth to be samanas or ascetics, but they would all have different teachings. And so India had that plurality in the culture. It had that freedom of speech. The freedom of religion was a very important part of that ancient culture. And some of the teachings that they had in those days, and these are things that sometimes we think in our Western world that we kind of are very advanced or ahead, or we are kind of, we are the pinnacle of the world culture. Silicon Valley. I just came from Silicon Valley, by the way. That was it before. And, but then you look at some of those teachings they had in ancient India. Now, one of the teachings that these famous teachers, the teaching he had was that when you die, everything is finished. It's like a modern atheist would say, right? Okay, you die, finished, everything stops. And of course, we consider that a very modern outlook, right? That when you die, because it is counter to the Christian ideas of going to heaven and all of these kind of things. So we think this is a kind of a modern idea. But the truth is, no, it has always been around. It was part of the Indian outlook 2,500 years ago. And that is kind of important. It's a very important point because one of the kind of really big trends in Buddhism in the Western world is this idea of secular Buddhism. Is anyone here who considers themselves a secular Buddhist? I'm not gonna say anything bad if you do. You're perfectly okay. You're absolutely fine to be a secular Buddhist, no problem at all. But the point I want to make is that very often the argument is made about Buddha, why rebirth is not really necessarily part of Buddhism, is that because the Buddha just took on the ideas of the existing culture. But the existing culture was actually very diverse. It wasn't as if everyone believed in rebirth. They were materialists, physicalists who believe that everything comes to an end when you die, just like there is today. So sometimes I think we have too much hubris in our modern society. We have this idea that we are not only advanced in technology. Sure, we are more advanced in technology than they were in those days. Of course, that is true. Some in certain areas of science, of course, we have certain more insight into certain things in the world. That is also true. But there are areas of life where they were on the same level as we are today. And I would say philosophically, in terms of the ideas about how the world works, they were on par, sometimes maybe ahead of the way we are today. Certainly spiritually, probably way ahead of where we are today. So just a reminder, that to actually we need to be humble, right? Sometimes people are too sure of ourselves. And that's where secular Buddhism really arises from, this idea that we're going to take the Buddhist teaching, we're going to chuck out the stuff that we don't like, and we're going to kind of add our modern values on top. But maybe you're throwing out the baby. Yeah, maybe you're losing the baby. Okay, bathwater can go, but baby, keep the baby for goodness sake. Rebirth is part of that baby. That's why the baby is there, right? You got reborn. So baby is important. Don't throw out the baby. And so this is where we need to be a bit humble. If the Buddha taught the idea of rebirth, it is presumably because it is important, right? It is not some kind of appendage to the teaching that can just be thrown out and then we're still stuck with the same teachings. So consider these things very carefully. If you find ideas like rebirth challenging, okay, that's fine. Of course, you can find them challenging, but don't throw them out wholesale. At least consider them carefully before you throw them out. Otherwise, you're not really giving the Buddhist teaching its due and proper consideration. So this is kind of the first things which I find interesting, as Indian society is in many ways very pluralistic, very much like society is here, maybe probably in North America. I don't really know all that much about North America. I have been here before briefly. I read about Trump in the newspapers, of course, because that's everywhere in the world. Yeah, Donald Trump, president of the US, this kind of stuff. And he's kind of a bit controversial everywhere, I guess. So you can't really get away from American politics. If you live on the Antarctica, you probably have to read about American politics, right? Because everyone is affected by what's happened in America. So everyone has some, feeling they have a stake in these things. So this is the first thing. Yeah, pluralism matters. But what about this idea of liberation, going beyond that very simple idea of freedom? What about other aspects of freedom? The first thing I want to talk a little bit about is the idea of morality. Very often in our kind of freedom-loving culture, we think that morality is like a hindrance on our freedom. We don't want to have any rules. We don't want to have any regulations. We want to live freely. We want to kind of drink when we drink, use dope when we want to use dope. We want to sometimes maybe we want to lie when we want to lie, because this is the right time to lie or whatever. And sometimes we want to do things that are harmful for ourselves and others from a Buddhist perspective. Want to be angry when we want to be angry and these kind of things. And it's this idea of freedom, being free to do what you want, not being circumscribed or restricted in your expressions of yourself. So what the problem with this, it's a very narrow way of understanding the idea of freedom. Yes, you can lie. Yes, you can even kill someone. no one is going to stop you if you really want to kill someone. They can't, because that's just the way the world is. You can do all kind of mischief, and there is a certain kind of freedom in that. But there's also a massive unfreedom in that, a massive kind of imprisonment in doing what you want. And the reason for that is very simple, because when you live a moral life, and the way I like to describe morality is not just kind of being moral. Moral in English means like you don't do any bad things. But the way I prefer is to live a life of kindness, because kindness, it includes the idea of not doing bad things, but it also adds on top of that the idea of actually doing good things, trying to be kind, trying to be supportive, trying to be compassionate, being generous, all of these kind of things. And the idea of kindness is that it is a freedom far more important than the freedom of doing what you want, because it is an inner freedom. It's a liberation of the mind. If you do bad things in the world, what you're going to find is you have remorse. You have regret for those things, whether you want to or not. There's going to be some kind of regret there. And that is a entrapment of the mind within you. And the mind does not feel free because that regret. The mind becomes small. The mind becomes circumscribed by those negative feelings, and you don't feel free. But if you live well, if you live with kindness, it's as if your mind expands. It goes into the world because you're literally reaching out to others when you're kind. And that reaching out to others makes your mind encompass the people and the world around you with compassion, with a sense of care, with a sense of understanding. And that is a beautiful beginning of the liberation of the mind, simply by living well, by living with kindness, by holding back. When you see the defilements of your mind wanting to do bad things, you stop yourself. You say, hold on, I don't want to go there. Why? It may seem like freedom right now, but in the long run, actually, it is imprisonment. This is the way to think about this. And then you start to understand what freedom really is about. And there is a nice story about this. There's always a story with these things. Has anyone here who has not heard about Ajahn Brahm? I don't ask, has anyone heard about him? Because I know most people have heard about him. Anyone who has not heard about Ajahn Brahm? Usually there's one person somewhere in the back corner somewhere who hasn't heard about Ajahn Brahm. But you have, okay, there's a few here. Okay, good. So this is marvelous. I can tell stories that probably everyone else has heard. This is kind of the nice thing about this. So Ajahn Brahm, he is my teacher in Australia. Australian British monk. He was taught by Ajahn Chah. Ajahn Chah is one of the, considered by many as the greatest meditation master in the 20th century in Thailand. And he was a teacher of many contemporary Western monks, one of whom was my teacher in Australia. Ajahn Brahm is probably one of the most famous monks, Buddhist monks in the world now, because he talks a lot. He's on YouTube a lot. He has millions of views on YouTube, so that makes you kind of famous after a while. But if you haven't heard of him, good on you. It means that you have been doing other stuff than watching YouTube all the time or whatever. But he is he's a very, very funny, very entertaining monk. And then this is what kind of his trademark. Very happy person. He's the happiest person I ever met in my entire life. I've lived with him for 30 years, and he just bubbles over with happiness. You know that something has happened with him. You don't know exactly what, but something profound has happened with this monk. Right? Whoa. It's the kind of thing, the most important thing in this world to market the Buddhist teaching is to see the example, right? The person who has come out of the process of long practice and actually see that it works. This is the best kind of marketing here. And Ajahn Brahm, that's kind of his marketing. He just tells jokes and tells stories, and he throws in a little bit of Dhamma in there. And when you have a good time, when you laugh, when you relax, the Dhamma, bang, goes straight to your heart. And then you understand the Buddhist teachings. That's the theory anyway. So the theory is that, that's an old Tibetan saying, the theory is that you make people laugh, and then when their mouth is agape, you throw in the pill of wisdom. It's a nice saying, right? And there's some truth in that, because when you laugh, you're relaxing, you're enjoying yourself. So Ajahn Brahm tells this story, and this is a story from Thailand. And there was these two monks, and these two monks, they were arguing about, there was a fish tank, they were eating. Monks sometimes get invited to private houses, and you eat, and they were eating in this very posh house. You had a big fish tank in this house. And one of the monks said, this is really bad. These are evil. These kind of, maybe not evil. They are bad people. They're keeping this fish in the fish tank, right? This is bad. Fish want to be in the wild. They want to swim free. They don't want to be kept in the fish tank, so that we can kind of enjoy for our entertainment, is seeing this fish swimming around. And then the other monk says, he says, hold on a minute. Are you really sure about that? Fish in the wild, there's predators around them all the time. Yeah, the fish, they have to look behind them to see if there's a predator. I'm not sure if fish can look behind them, but if they can look over the. Do they have shoulders? I'm not sure if they have shoulders. So they are afraid, right? There's predators around all the time in the wild. The water is sometimes cold, sometimes too hot. If you're a fish born in Minnesota, it's blooming cold to live in these lakes out in Minnesota in the wintertime. Same as Norway, you go ice skating and the fish have to live underneath the ice. The water temperature, sometimes the water is too hot because of the variations of the seasons. And the food often isn't quite right. Yeah, sometimes there's a scarcity of food, other times there is an abundance of food. Sometimes the water goes down because the water isn't regulated. There's a dry season, and suddenly you kind of find yourself in a little puddle. And that's really dangerous if you are a fish. But these fish in the fish tank, yeah, they get fed every day. They get the kind of ideal food because the owner understands what fish should really have, low cholesterol diet. Yeah, the fish doesn't get heart attack. Is that true? I don't know. I'm guessing fish are just like us. They have bodies, so probably they have heart attacks as well, right? Get low cholesterol diet. The water temperature is just right. Thank you, owner. This is really, so this temperature is just perfect. There's no predators in that water tank. It's just nice. Okay, so they are circumscribed. They have 4 walls. They can't go beyond that. But there's a lot of positive things in that water tank for those fish. Yeah. So sometimes you lose a bit of liberty, but at the same time, you get free of so many of the dangers of the world around you. That is exactly what morality is about. Yes, you lose a bit of liberty when you have to live a moral life, but you are liberated from lack of self-worth. You're liberated from remorse. You're liberated from feeling bad about yourself. In fact, you start feeling good about yourself when you live really well. Have you noticed that? How you start to feel a sense of self-worth, sense of self-esteem when you live well? You feel, I'm doing good. Yeah, I'm living well. I'm keeping the 5 precepts or whatever it is that you're keeping. I'm trying to be kind. I'm trying to help out in the world, doing the right thing. Good. Yay me. Yeah, I'm doing the right thing. And you don't feel that in a boastful way. You don't become arrogant. You don't become some kind of unsavory character because of that, but you feel a sense of warm feeling within yourself. It's a quiet kind of feeling, right? You close your eyes and you meditate and you just feel good about yourself in your heart. That is the idea of kindness. That is the idea of morality. That is a kind of liberation, a kind of freedom. And it is also the foundation of meditation practice, right? If you want to have success in your meditation, you have to feel good about yourself, because when you feel good about yourself, you want to be here, you want to be present. If you feel bad about yourself, your mind wants to be in the future, wants to be in the past, it wants to fantasize. If you feel good about yourself, you want to be present. Mindfulness becomes possible for someone who lives well, right? You make the present moment the pleasant moment. Isn't that a nice saying here? Make the present moment the pleasant moment. This is another of Ajahn Brahm's kind of catchphrases, yeah? He's a master of catchphrases. Make the present moment the pleasant moment. That is where meditation is possible, because you're enjoying it. You're enjoying being here and now. So this is the first thing to remember about the idea of freedom, yeah? Morality is liberation. Morality is freedom. There's no freedom in doing what you want. That is enslavement to your desires. It's a completely different thing here. Another important aspect of freedom is the idea of, or the problem of freedom, I should say. The problem of enslavement is that we are enslaved to our habits. Yeah, our habits are very, very strong. And because our habits are so strong, actually we tend to kind of follow along those habits. It's very hard to go against our habits. Yeah, and the kind of typical things would be things like anger or ill will or irritation. I don't know if you've noticed, there are certain situations or certain people that tend to upset you. Do you have that in your life? I have that in my life. I have less now, but I used to have it more. The path is working, fortunately. But right, there's some people, they just, for some reason, they upset you. Yeah, I don't know what it is. Obviously, some people are really obnoxious, so they kind of upset you, or sometimes they do, unless you think the right way. But you start to realize that because the same situation and the same person has a tendency to upset you, it is like a habit. And if you try to stop it, actually, it's incredibly hard. It is very difficult, right? And if I tell you, don't get irritated or get upset with anyone for one whole day, I bet you very few people in this room would be able to do that. It's very easy to get upset and irritated occasionally. And if I told you not to get upset or irritated for a whole week, you say that's impossible. Get out of here. Don't want to have anything more to do with you. You can't do that. Yeah, it's very hard. And the reason it is so hard is because we don't have free will to make our minds go the way we want it to go. And here we're getting into the idea of freedom of will, which is a very important part of the idea of freedom. How much free will do we actually have? And when you start to try to control your life and live in the right way, live with kindness, not getting angry, you start to understand the limitations of your free will. I would like, if I could, to be kind all the time. Yeah, I would like to, because I know that if I'm kind, I'm also happy. I make other people happy and I feel good about myself. So I would like to be kind absolutely all the time if I could. But actually it's very hard to be kind all the time. And the reason why it is hard, because our habits are leading us in a different direction. We don't have the freedom that we think we have of being exactly who we want to be. We are trapped by our habits. Try not to be angry, you can't do it. Yeah, and it's so many things in life. Yeah, like habits, like the desires that we have in this life. Yeah, I don't know, I often think about the kind of food I like and the food other people like is often very different. I like Norwegian food, surprise, surprise. Why do I like Norwegian food? Because I was born in Norway. Yeah, in Norway they serve Norwegian food. You kind of get used to it after a while, and then you eat it afterwards. But other people look at this food I'm eating and think, what, you're going to eat that? Are you nuts? No way I'm going to eat this stuff. And then you go, I'm staying with some Sri Lankan friends now, Nandana and his friends, and they serve you Sri Lankan food. Yeah, Sri Lankans like Sri Lankan food. Why? Because they're born in Sri Lanka, right? And that's what they like. And whenever I go to a Sri Lankan house, you can expect to get Sri Lankan food. So are we choosing the things in the world freely, or are we choosing it out of habits? It feels like you're freely choosing these things, but actually, are you really choosing anything at all? Or are your habits choosing for you? The reality is we have very little freedom. And the more you start to look at this idea of how much freedom we have, the ability to steer our life, whatever, the more you start to look at your habits, where they come from, why you act in certain ways, you start to realize how limited the free will is, to the point where you ask yourself, is there really any free will at all? That is a good question. Or maybe it isn't. It is a question anyway. Is there any free will at all? And this is one of those kind of greatly debated things in the world. Is such a thing as free will? Does it make any sense? And at the very least, what we can say is that if there is free will, it is in a very tiny area. The majority of what we do is not free at all. It is conditioned by our past. And because, as a Buddhist, I also have no doubt that there is past lives, it is conditioned very deeply in the past, through things that we have done lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. That is why we keep on doing the same mistakes, having the same bad habits again and again and again. And our job on this path, and this is why this path is so hard, is to overcome that conditioning as much as we can. Get rid of that ill will, get rid of the anger, get rid of that irritation, get rid of all the bad habits and move on to the good habits instead. That is what this path is about. And that is why it is so hard, because the conditioning is so profound. Remember that, try to change, right? And then you know how difficult it is to change. It is very hard to change. One of the consequences of it being very hard to change is that you should never really expect people around you to change. Very often when we are in a relationship, it's a long time now since I was in a relationship, but believe it or not, 30 years ago or something like that, 35 years ago, I can barely remember now, it's a long time ago, I was in a relationship. I know what it's like to be in a relationship with someone. And in relationships, we often In the beginning, everything is kind of, roses and wonderful. And after a while, you start finding fault with each other, right? And then you want to change the other party. Yeah, or you want to change your kids because the kids are doing the wrong thing. Or you want to change your parents because the parents are not as perfect as they should be. We kind of like to think that we can change people around us. But remember how hard it is to change yourself. And when you know how hard it is to change yourself, never expect anyone else in this world to change. Yeah, because you are really asking for the impossible. There is really only one way of dealing with other people. That's to accept them the way they are. And the miracle is the moment you start accepting them from who they are, that is where also you maximize the possibility that they actually may change. Because when people feel accepted, when they feel loved, when they feel that you have compassion for them, you're not trying to control them, that is when they become more open to see their own weaknesses. In my experience, anyway. So we have all of this conditioning in our life. Yeah, we're not really free at all. Yeah, and the kind of limited freedom we have is often so tiny. Yeah, we have tiny little freedoms in our life. We have freedom to choose whether to eat an apple or a pear, a banana or an orange, right? And it's nothing. There's no freedom in that at all. And this brings us to this much more important thing. And that is that we are limited in our choices in the world by these very powerful biases, these very powerful defilements in our minds. By defilements, I mean things like anger. Anger is considered a defilement in Buddhism. Are you new to Buddhism? Yeah, sort of. Yeah, you heard the word defilement before? No. Okay, so this is the time. Yeah. So defilements. But defilements are these kind of corruptions within that make us do bad things. Yeah. So it can be ill will. It can be too much desire. Yeah, that kind of makes you do immoral things. Or it can be delusion. We don't really understand the world properly. And because these things are very deeply imprinted on our mind, they have a very large effect on our life. Yeah, we see the world through the lens of these defilements. We don't really see the world clearly at all. We see it through the lens of these defilements. And because we are limited by these defilements and our worldview is limited by these things, the choices that we have are limited by those defilements. We don't even know what is available in the world. How can we make good choices when we don't know what's available? And this is why I'm very glad to see people on the spiritual path, to see you here, because you are people who have a larger vision of reality. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. You have a larger idea what may be possible in this world. But most people have no idea. For most people, freedom of choice means, okay, do you want this kind of car or that kind of car? Yeah. Do you want, I see this enormous cars here in America, do you want this kind of, what is it called, truck, or this other, whatever it's called, right? This enormous beasts kind of going around the roads here. So what do you, and these are kind of the choices, yeah? But who cares if you drive this kind of car or that kind of car? Who cares if you eat Sri Lankan food or Norwegian food, yeah? Who cares about these tiny little things? These don't really make for real happiness in our life. And once you start practicing the spiritual path, because you have some kind of confidence and faith that there's more in the world, things start to open up. Yeah, gradually, because you are living well, you're doing the right thing, you're living with kindness. Some of the defilements in your mind start to die down. You are less angry. And when you are less angry, you start to see the world in a different way. Your heart opens up to other people in a way that it hasn't done before. And that opens up possibilities. Suddenly, you can choose not to be angry. Suddenly, you can choose compassion. Suddenly, you can choose kindness. You weren't able to do that before because you hadn't done those practices that allow the mind to open up to that possibility. So we don't know what is possible. How can we have freedom of choice when we don't know what is available to us in this world? And then you start to meditate. And when you start to do a little bit of meditation, you start maybe to feel a bit peaceful. And then you understand that there is peace available in this life, in this world, that you had no idea was actually available to human beings. That opens up another horizon, another possibility of what actually is available, what we can do with choosing things in the right way. And then you go further in your meditation, and you start feeling bliss, joy, happiness, so profound that you had, it's kind of mind-blowing. Yeah, in the Buddhism, mind-blowing often is of the literal kind. Okay, I'm not going to go there now, but so, and you feel things that you had no idea were even possible. And of course, when you see an alternative reality like that, of something that's possible, again, it expands the horizon of what can be chosen in this world. So when we talk about freedom of choice in the world, it is so limited. Our freedom is circumscribed by our inner habits, by our inner defilements that make it impossible to choose that real happiness because we don't even know it exists. Yeah, we have no idea that these things are available even. And so you have to abandon some of these defilements. You have to give up some of these delusions that we have. And when you do that, the world opens up in a new way. Then you have the possibility of choosing happiness for the first time, because now you have an idea where happiness is to be found. Before you had no idea. Very often in Buddhism, we talk about the idea of right view. Yeah. What is right view? Okay, so right view in Buddhism is kind of, defined as things as believing in rebirth, etc., etc. But what does right really come down to? If we're going to summarize the idea of right view in a very simple way, what does it actually mean? And what right view means in a very simple way, it means the ability to understand the difference between happiness and suffering. That's really what it is, yeah? And most of us, we don't have that right view, so we don't know where happiness and suffering are to be found, yeah? This is precisely the problem. So what I'm talking about here, when I talk about the problem of the defilements, the problem of not seeing the world clearly, basically we have wrong view. Our idea of the world is not aligned with the way the Buddha saw the world. The Buddha had this kind of great panoramic view of human existence. He understood the problems and the realities of human life. And the idea of being a Buddhist is to try to align our view a little bit with the way the Buddha saw the world. And this is what this is about. We are approaching right view when we find peace, joy, happiness, the meaning of life itself through meditation practice. And then it goes even deeper. Then it goes to the idea of insight, yeah, seeing the world as it actually is. And this is where you start to discover the very meaning of life, where you start to discover the deepest kind of happiness that is available to human beings. But who could have thought that these things were even available, yeah, in this life, unless it was for the Buddha, unless it was for a spiritual teacher that pointed you in the right direction. So suddenly things start to open up. Suddenly the search for happiness becomes possible because now you know where happiness is to be found. And so the paradox is that the people who are the most happy in the world are the people who have walked the spiritual path the furthest. The further you have gone on the spiritual path, the more you understand where happiness is found. And those people who have come towards the end of the spiritual path, they don't look for happiness anymore. They have given up on the ordinary happinesses of the world, and they are content just to sit down on the bottom, close their eyes, and just chill and do nothing at all. That's all they do, right? And that is the happiest thing in the world you can do if you know where happiness is to be found. Close your eyes, watch your breath, go into a deep state of meditation. That's what the Buddha did, and that's what all the people we call awakened in Buddhism, that's what they do. So this is profound, right? The reason why free will is meaningless in ordinary society is because we don't even know what to choose. So to have free will, we need to take away the barriers to understanding where happiness is to be found. Then when we take away the barriers and we start to understand where happiness is to be found, then we have a different kind of free will because we have the ability to choose real happiness. That is the real free will of Buddhism. The other free will is kind of nothing. It doesn't really matter. The free will is to take away those things that block us from choosing what we really want. And that's kind of a powerful insight. It changes the whole free will debate, and it makes us look at this whole question in a new way. The very last thing I want to talk about, I'm not finished yet. So I hope you will forgive me for carrying on a little bit further. The very last thing I want to talk about is the problem of the idea of willing, any kind of willing. And one of the things that you find in meditation practice, and that you find this in the Buddha's suttas and the Buddha's discourses, when he teaches meditation like the Anapanasati Sutta, the sutta on mindfulness of breathing, if you read that sutta, discourse of the Buddha, you will see that one of the red threads in that sutta is the idea of calming down, Kaya sankarang patisambhati means you calm down the breath. Yeah, chitta sankarang patisambhati, you calm down the mind, the feelings, and the perceptions that you have. You what is it? How does it go again? Samahita samadhang chitta. You calm. You still the mind, right? All of these things are about calming down, about bringing kind of the mind to peace. What does it mean to bring the mind to peace? Well, what it means really is that you are taking the will, the volition, the intention out of the mind. Yeah, you're doing less and less. You're not using the will anymore. And what you discover as you do this, as you reduce the will in your meditation, you become more happy. The less doing there is, the less activity there is in the mind, the less the will is involved in what you're doing, the more happy you are, the more joyful is the experience, the more released you feel, the more free you feel as a consequence. It's so counterintuitive because we talk about freedom of the will, but maybe the will itself is a problem. Maybe the will is a kind of tyrant. Maybe the will is one of the aspects of dukkha and suffering that we actually want to overcome. And when you see some of these remarkable suttas about how the Buddha talks about meditation practice, and one of my favorite suttas is a sutta called the Chaitanya Sutta. Chaitanya means volition or will, right? And in this sutta, the Buddha explains the psychology of meditation, the kind of psychological development that you can expect when meditation is going well. And I talked about this just on the retreat that we had down in the, what is the place called? Down in south of here somewhere, an hour south of Minneapolis. Then. And in the sutta, it starts off with morality, with sila. Sila is the Pali word for morality. From that morality, you have no regret. From no regret, you have joy. Because you feel good about yourself. From the joy, you have rapture. Rapture is like the energies, powerful, blissful energies that kind of rush through you, right? From the rapture, you get tranquility. It's like the evolution of meditation I'm talking about now, how it ideally evolves when you meditate, when meditation really comes together. From the rapture, you get tranquility. From the tranquility, you get bliss, even deeper bliss than before. From the bliss comes samadhi. Samadhi is the absolute stillness of the mind. And from that stillness of the mind comes the insight into the nature of reality called the Yata Bhuta Nanadassana in Pali. I always use a few Pali terms because it sounds impressive. It increases my authority as a teacher. Yeah, so that's why I do this. I say, oh, it's the trick there, right? So anyway, that's... But what is so beautiful about this? The first thing you will have noticed when I said that is so much about happiness, right? Joy, rapture, bliss. Then there is tranquility in there. Then it is non-regret. The whole path of meditation is really about bliss and happiness. But then the very interesting point about this, and this is kind of the one that really caught my eye, and it caught my eye because it is exactly the way that my teacher, Ajahn Brahm, teaches meditation. When I first went to Bodhinyana Monastery in Perth in Western Australia, that's almost 30 years ago now, Ajahn Brahm would tell me how to meditate. He would say, sit down, relax, and just wait, and everything just happens. And I said, what? That's not meditation. What about the breath? What about kind of all the things we're supposed to do? What about all of these kind of, contemplations or whatever? He said, just relax, sit down, and wait. Everything just happens, yeah? Don't do anything. The less you do, the better. And of course, it didn't work. Yeah, most people find this very frustrating because nothing really happens. Yeah, you sit there and wait, and you just think about things, and nothing happens. But if you are a really good meditator, it works really, really well. You sit, you wait, the bliss just comes, the mind becomes peaceful. Why? Because you don't do anything, and when you don't get involved in anything, and your morality is really powerfully founded, it just happens. And you go into a jhana state, a deep samadhi state. You bliss out completely. 10 hours later, you come out of that jhana, and you kind of really, you are like a nuclear reactor afterwards, like Ajahn Brahm says about the energy that you have when you come out, right? Yeah. And so the interesting thing about this particular thing and the sequence of steps is that the Buddha talks about what you do between each of these steps, right? So how do you go from non-regret to joy? How do you go from joy to rapture? How do you move up this ladder of psychological qualities or states that you're supposed to experience, ideally. And the Buddha says, he says, na chetanaya karaniya. This is not to be done through volition. He says it's dhammata. Dhammata means it is in accordance with nature. These things just happen according to nature. And you cannot do nature. Nature has to happen according to the laws of that nature, right? You can't make nature happen faster than it actually should. So he's actually saying, get the will out of it, because if you use the will, it is as if you're trying to make nature happen. But nature has to evolve according to its own course. So, and that is kind of fascinating, yeah? No will, nothing to be done, allowing the process to happen. And then when that process happens, it takes you all the way to samadhi. Samadhi is this beautiful term found in all the Indian languages, which really means the kind of deep stillness of the mind, deep meditation, right? We don't really have it in the English language. Actually, now, if you go to the Oxford English Dictionary, yeah, you find samadhi is actually in there. More and more Buddhist terminology is making their way into these greatest reference works in the world. Yeah, Oxford English Dictionary being maybe, for many people, the primary reference work for the English language. So samadhi is actually found there because it is a very unique term to the Indian culture, because Indian culture is so spiritual. And that samadhi means stillness. In that stillness, all the will is gone. The mind is completely unified. All you do is you are completely focused on the object, no movement, sitting there hour after hour without anything happening. All you experience is bliss. And it is the highest happiness you have ever had in your entire life. The will is gone. At that point, you understand for your first time in your life that will is a torture. Will is a problem. This thing that we worship in the world, because we are creative, right? We enjoy creation. Creation comes from using the will. We enjoy doing things. We are doers. We identify with doing. One of the most important identifications with the habits we're doing. Yeah, that is what creation is about. That is what doing, whatever it is you do, is about. Identifying with the doer. And some people identify so much with the doer, they can't really be still at all. For the first time in your life, you understand, no, actually, the will is part of the problem. Giving up the will, that is where you find real bliss. This is where you find true happiness. So the whole cultivation, the whole culmination of this path of freedom, we talk about free will, but actually the idea of free will is a red herring, because the will itself, it turns out to be a problem. And this is where you find the deepest kind of liberation on the Buddhist path, when you give up these things, and that disappears entirely. The path isn't quite finished there, because even though you have found kind of the greatest happiness that is possible usually in human existence, you have to come out of those states of meditation. And when you come out of them, then of course things start to re-arise again. You have some of those problems, so you have to go further. You have to gain some insight into the nature of reality that comes from those states of bliss anyway. And then ultimately you gain the final freedom on the Buddhist path. And the final freedom on the Buddhist path is, of course, the liberation from all suffering, the highest happiness that is possible for a human being. So that is pretty much what I wanted to say. Probably could have said it. I probably should have said many more things, but that's kind of all. I think probably enough for now. So just a little bit of the idea of liberation and freedom on the Buddhist path, and how it is quite different from how we often think about freedom and liberation, especially in perhaps Western culture, and to give you some indication about what this is all about. So I hope I haven't scared you too much, because if it is kind of one of the first times you hear about these ideas, it may sound kind of outrageous and weird, but I have enough experience with teachers and with people, a little bit through my own meditation, but to know that this is not just a mirage. These things are real, yeah? And at least you know that some of the way, when you see some of it, you can kind of extrapolate it to have a rough idea where this is heading. So now I would like to open up for questions, or comments or debates or whatever you like. So would anyone like to say anything or question about anything that I have talked about? You are very welcome. There's one at the back there.
I think before we do that.
Yeah.
will you move
Sorry.
your-
Yeah.
This mic, it's in your fold, and I think it'll make it easier for people online.
All right. Okay.
And the people in the room here, you're gonna use this mic and have it pointed right at your mouth, pretty close like this.
Yeah. All right.
And we can help each other pass this around.
Good evening.
Good evening. Yeah.
First of all, thank you for your teaching. I really appreciate it.
Good. I'm happy to hear that. Yeah. Yeah.
I guess what stuck out the most is what you said about volition, and the thought occurred to me that it takes volition to sit, and then it takes volition to
Yeah.
choose a meditation object. So
Yeah.
if you describe that
Yeah.
process. Thank you.
Yeah. That's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that up. And this is one of those kind of maybe slightly paradoxical things about the path, is that you need to use some of those ordinary things of life to transcend them. You use them to transcend them. And in Buddhism, there's many things like that. There's like craving or desire. You have to have some desire to, again, set yourself up in the right way, sit down, watch the breath. If you have no desires, nothing is going to happen, right? So some desire is required to overcome desire. Some attachment is required to overcome attachment. Some conceit is required to overcome conceit. Yeah, so it's a good, important point. You can't just give up the will just like that. You use a kind of a preliminary, positive kind of will, and then you refine that stage by stage until eventually you give it up completely. Yeah.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Great. So, anyone else want to say anything here? Please don't be shy. Yeah, here. Yeah.
So, one thing that has appealed to me in Buddhism is what I've heard from many teachers of like, try it for yourself. Don't just take my word for it.
Yeah.
Investigate.
Yeah.
Does this create freedom,
Yeah.
etc. And I feel skeptical about rebirth.
Okay.
I feel open.
Yeah.
But skeptical.
Good. I fully understand where you're coming from. I can make. Yeah. Good. Yeah. Yeah.
And so it doesn't feel the same to me that I could investigate it and see for myself, is this the truth? Rebirth, the way it has for many of the other teachings. And there's even, other parts of my mind, like if you look at a graph of population of the world, and you see in the 1850s it goes up, and then in the 1960s it's like going straight up to the ceiling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does that work?
There are good answers to those, of course. Yeah.
With rebirth.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I want to know. I want to know your answer. And
Yeah. Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So the first thing I would say is that, one of the things that happens as you practice these teachings is that you start to gain faith into this person called the Buddha. Yeah. The more you practice and you see that he was right about so many things, about the way of practice, how you watch the breath and it gives this amazing results, how you live with kindness and has all these things. After a while, you cannot help taking the Buddha incredibly seriously. You start to understand this is the greatest spiritual genius in recorded human history here. There's no doubt about it. You start to feel this very powerfully here. You read some of his words, some of the things that he said, and you are in the presence of something really awesome, something extraordinary here. And as you do that, your ideas that the Buddha comes up with, like rebirth, also become much more powerful as a consequence. Yeah, you start to see that actually there's something here that I really need to take seriously. And then gradually you may move more towards rebirth simply through that process of gaining more confidence in someone. Yeah, this is one part of it. The other part of it is that one of the reasons why people don't believe in rebirth is because in our Western culture it is considered like a religious idea. Yeah, and many people are post-religious. Before I became a Buddhist, I was an atheist. Yeah, I don't believe in anything. I mean, majority of people now in places like Norway are atheists. They don't believe in anything at all. And of course, in that society, and if something is considered religious, it is problematic. But rebirth is not really religious in that way. rebirth is something the Buddha says he discovered to be the truth of nature. This is how things work, right? So it's not like a metaphysical speculation. It's not a philosophical idea that is added on top of reality. It is actually said to be a discovery by the Buddha, right? So how does that fit with our modern outlook? Well, the reality is that our modern outlook, we don't really understand the mind. The mind is one of the frontiers of science we haven't got a clue about. Science tried to say, well, the mind emerges from physical phenomena. Actually, there's no evidence for that. A lot of scientists are abandoning that position because they realize it doesn't make sense. And there is now a movement in the scientific world back towards taking consciousness and the mind very seriously again. Sometimes we get trapped by our culture, our zeitgeist. The zeitgeist says this is bad, and so we get trapped by that. But we should remember that some of these ideas are just the fashions of the time. And the fact that we live in a physicalist society where everything is said to emerge from physical phenomena is really just a philosophical fashion of the time that we live in. If you go back to the 18th, 19th century in Europe, and you look at some of the philosophers in the 19th century, mind was considered primary. Yeah, these philosophers were called idealist philosophers. Idealism in that mind is primary, physical phenomena are secondary. And in the 20th century, the pendulum kind of swung back again. Materialism became in the ascendancy. Now it seems to be swinging back again. Mind is being taken more seriously. So one of the important things is not to allow ourselves to be trapped in the fashions of our culture, but to step back a little bit and maybe realize actually some people, maybe like the Buddha, may have had a broader view of reality than many modern people have, because we don't really understand. There are things we don't understand. Mind is one of those things. So this also opens your view up a little bit more, because you start to understand actually you can be an atheist and also believe in rebirth. Yeah, these things are not inconsistent with each other. And that's why I think this idea of secular Buddhism is misguided, because Buddhism is already secular in many ways. Yeah, Buddhism is not really a religion in the ordinary sense of the word. Buddhism is about understanding reality. It's about understanding the way things are, and that should be compatible with science. It should not be it's not the same as science, but it should at least be compatible with science. Yeah, it should discover truths in a different way, true, but still it should be compatible with the scientific method and all of that. And this is one of the reasons that I'm still consider myself an atheist in many ways, but I'm also a Buddhist at the same time. I'm a Buddhist atheist. That to me is actually much more real than secular Buddhist. Yeah. So that's where I would start. And then you can start looking at some of the very interesting research that is being done around the world. Things like near-death experiences. There is an American researcher called Bruce Grayson who recently gave out a book called After. It's all about near-death experience. It's a really fascinating book. When you read it, you cannot help to be touched by some of those stories. They're really amazing. Another researcher called Dr. Ian Stevenson, who investigated into small children claiming to remember past lives, also very, very fascinating. So there's lots of things going on that point in a different direction, in a very interesting direction. So keep on investigating and see where it gets you. Yeah, that's what I would recommend. Okay.
Can we do one more? There's somebody online.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Sean, do you want to unmute yourself?
Hello, this is Sean here, and
Hi, Sean.
I'm wondering, one of my big focuses for using my will when I'm meditating is trying to maintain an upright posture, because I came out of Zen, and I'm wondering, is it better to try to do all my things to get my spine upright outside of meditation, like with yoga, and then to just mostly relax and not try to work too hard at being good posture during meditating, to let go of my will?
Yeah, I would say don't try too hard. Find a posture that is reasonably comfortable. I think one of the things that we learn in meditation that you're supposed to have an upright posture. And that is true, but sometimes if you are very tired when you start out in a meditation, it is okay to slouch a little bit. It's okay to lean against the wall. It is okay to relax, first of all. So don't try to have the perfect posture until you feel ready, until you have a degree of mindfulness, until you have a degree of clarity in the mind. Then the posture almost comes by itself, because it feels right to sit upright, right? If the mind is already clear, you gain even more clarity by sitting straight. So get things in the right order, and then it will be easier for you, more natural for you. You can also, if you find it difficult to maintain your posture and you have to kind of use a lot of willpower and force to do that, you can do things like you can try different postures. Yeah, and one of the postures that sometimes can work if your mind is clear is actually lying down. Yeah, you can lie on your back or whatever, and if you don't lie on a surface that is too soft, yeah, don't lie on the kind of plushest bed in the world because you're going to fall asleep, but lie on a surface that is comfortable without being super soft, and you may find that works. Or sit on a chair if you have to work too hard on your posture. So find something where you find a kind of a good balance between not too much willpower, the ease of the body, and a good posture in one way or another. Does that make sense, or do you want to come back on that one?
No, I think it's very good. It just gives me something to do with my will to like focus on getting my head back, my head over my shoulders. So I'm realizing it's a bit of my Zen background that I can let go of to not try to get,
Okay, all right. Okay, good luck, Sean. Yeah. That's good. It's 8:30. I'm happy to take some more questions. I don't know if you have a very strict routine here or whatever. You're the boss.
Maybe one more?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah.
Will and I think you speak of will and letting go of the will, and I'm wondering what role does intention play? Does that interact with will, or is that just a separate thing altogether?
It is related, right? Because when you intend something, usually there is a movement in the will that goes with the intention. So if you intend to be kind to someone or intend to say something nice, then the will does the activity of being kind afterwards. Yeah. So intention, you can even say that intention itself is a kind of will, it's a movement of the mind, and that is a kind of will in its own right. So it's part of it. So, when I say that there is no will in meditation, it is usually there's too much will usually here. So the idea there is to reduce the will as much as possible. That's kind of the idea. And it's to instead ask, what are the causes that give rise to good meditation? If there is no will, then you have to put the basic causes really strongly into place. And the basic cause is kindness. Yeah, it is kind of living well. That is the cause. From the sequence I mentioned before, from the kindness arises non-regret. From that comes the gladness or the joy, and etc., etc. So that is really where the work is. And then meditation should be about relaxing. We tend to use far too much will. And it's kind of, sometimes it's really terrible because I see people who use so much willpower and are so stressed out about meditation. Instead of meditation becoming something beneficial in their life, something that adds value to their life, the spiritual path should add value to our lives. What's the point of a spiritual path if it doesn't add value? It's madness to make it into some kind of torture, but that is what some people do. Yeah, they sit with pain, they sit with problems, they force themselves to do this, they watch the breath, they grasp the breath. No, the breath should not be grasped at all. There should be a natural awareness of the breath without grasping. That is where that meditation becomes really powerful and beautiful. So yes, there is a degree of intention there. When you start out, you kind of set up your mind in a good way. Yeah, you set up a certain attitude to yourself. Okay, I'm going to be kind to myself, compassionate to myself and to other people. You have an idea of establishing the mindfulness first of all. These are all attitudes, they're all intentions as you start out. You remind yourself that the world isn't all that interesting. Yeah, I don't know about you, but when I see all the troubles in the world, I think, okay, enough of that. And I kind of reject the world a little bit because it seems to be unsolvable sometimes, some of the issues in the world. So you set that up and then you come to the meditation, because if the world isn't interesting, well, then the spiritual path is more interesting here. And you come to this path. So you set up some of these perceptions initially, like you have an intention, and then the mind kind of guides itself. And then if the mind does go wrong, instead of using willpower, use a little bit of nudging. I prefer to use the word nudging rather than volitional will. So if the mind goes astray, maybe you have a thought which you think is not really helpful in meditation, you nudge the mind very gently, maybe bringing it back to the breath, reminding yourself why this thought doesn't work, etc., etc. And then you kind of bring it back again. So relaxing, a little bit of nudging, a little bit of intention at the beginning. Yeah. That's how I see the path of meditation here. Happy with that? Yeah, okay, good. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ajahn. Beautiful, powerful Dharma talk.
Yeah.
And people know that when we have a guest teacher, those of you online, we put something in the chat. We offer 2/3 of the dana, the donations that come in to the teacher. So we'll find out if Ajahn wants us to send it to the monastery where he's living in Western Australia, or other Dharma projects, or medical funds, or whatever he needs for his monastic life, which usually isn't too much, but there's always some place to put that money to good work for the practices and the retreats and the monastery. And then 1/3 stays for common ground to take care of the building and the paid staff and things like that. So people in the room here, you know, there's an iPad in the other room and a donation bowl. And you can just see me if you have any questions about that. And those of you online, you see the link in the chat and you can donate through the website that way. And we're so grateful, and maybe someday you'll be back in the Midwest.
See
We'd
what
love to
happens.
have you back.
Great, thank you for your warm welcome. It's been nice to be here. So great.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for coming. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thanks, Ajahn.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.